One last thing. If you think I'm being extraordinarily harsh on PR firms, you're probably right. I should be tougher. I'll go into this more with my diagnosis on the gaming industry, but the simple truth is that PR firms are tied to publishers who make money on others' work. Marketers can make up 60% of a game's budget, while the fixed wages of developers keep them expendable. This is an economic structure that is inevitably unstable and primed to cause unrest. But again, that's another argument for another time, and this one needs finishing. We've talked about Inafune's early years, Dina, and DDM. The question is, where do we go from here? Well, we use DDM to go to Ben Judd, so it only makes sense that we talk about concept a bit more. As we learned from Dina's interview, she was connected through Ben Judd into concept. We're going to do two things. We're going to be on the outside looking in, then we'll delve into the company and look outward. Work with me, I'll work you through it. What we're going to do is look at what they've produced as a company, then work on the people inside of it. See, that wasn't so bad. So let's start with the outside looking in first. Concept has a number of companies that help them do what they do. 8-4 Studios is a translation company. Essentially, they are given contract work by publishers to translate games from Japanese to English in order to provide a consistent job. I'm going to cut this one short because I don't have enough information to go on, but the basic gist of the problem is that 8-4 helped Dina and as well as did poor jobs on some great franchises such as Dragon Quest VI, which a lot of people have negative memories about. I talked about this early on with the Criminal Girls issue. Make no mistake that the translation can have an effect on enjoyment of a title. While some can have multiple translations, there are a few things that can cut into being able to enjoy a title. Number one, regionalization. Essentially, this makes it so that profits on a console remain in a country. For a corporation that's trying to look good for shareholders, the public is just seen as a wallet. This means you lock down their options, excluding portions of the market from a purchase to boost up numbers domestically. Number two, outsourcing. The quality in outsourcing can be iffy, and a studio like 8-4 relies on a monopoly to maintain their translation production. Without actual competition, which copyright allows them to make money off a translation with minor edits, most translation studios don't have to put a lot of effort into translations, which can kill quality. Number three, nepotism. Usually I take nepotism as an issue where the system is bad. When people play by the rules and outcomes can blindside supporters, it's not a good sign of a system that works as intended. Nepotism works to benefit a cabal, i.e. a select few. Changing that means a change to something more democratic. Hard to do if the business isn't formed around democracy, but I digress. Now, of course, there are other issues, but I've not the time to go into each and every one. These three help to explain some of the problems that go on if a company isn't reviewed for its fiscal as well as production health. With no way to force these companies out of their bad practices, it relies on gamers to do quite a few things to enjoy a game that may fall below the gaming community's standards. Make no mistake, monopolistic competition hurts the consumer in the end, but people are so used to it that they've opted to do very different things to ensure product quality. One is piracy, where the economic block is too high of a hurdle. The other is trusting reviews. Finally, you have some opting out or just watching a video on YouTube. Those are the main three. Again, this isn't the point of the issue, but just to explain about 8-4. With no way to promote older works except through the ideas of a select few, the translations can be done independent of what people actually would know in regards to a game. When interviewed by Giant Bomb, John Ricciardi stated how he believed that Japanese producers were more willing to allow games to be touched by American hands. However, this does come with some downfalls in that if someone makes a bad call on a game, such as in Gunvolt, it can make the game look dumb. With so many cogs in the wheel, this essentially becomes a look into smaller kinks with the system. As we break down the system, you see that each individual piece can have a great effect on the eventual end product. This is why we take the short detours to explain the smaller parts which may have gone unnoticed. Also, it gives you a chance to recover from the beating that Inafune got in the first parts of this. That way, we can go right back to bashing in a bit after explaining that smaller companies such as 8-4 are affected by what Concept and others give them in terms of work. Now, I don't mean to pick on Inafune. I like picking on Inafune, but I certainly don't have to. but he turns into such a target of criticism that it makes it easier to look at the company and see what he's about. Honestly, the best way to put them out of business is to have internal quality control, which is more expensive for a company, but allows for interesting things such as Woolseyisms, which worked out for Square. Overall, outside translation can cost more to a company. For one such as Concept, you would think they would do it on the inside, as 8.4 is spotty with their translation work, and it's far easier to allow things to slip into a game that most people won't be able to change until it's too late. However, you're asking about two things in essence. What is Concept and who does all the work? For all purposes, Concept isn't doing the game. Okay, put down the pitchforks. I'm serious. The game is being made by NT Creates. Concept gives them money to make a game and give a few people some extra duties in trying to make a new game. Now, why are they important here? Think about it. Who made the older games for Capcom along with most of the franchises? Capcom? Hardly. If you saw my last video on it, Capcom acts like a publishing clearinghouse, opting to give third-party companies a shot and act as a part of the main company when this isn't so. Further, look at Ben Judd's Bionic Commando for an example on how to outsource. So this is another notch in the idea that Concept isn't a traditional gaming company that we know. So should we go into NT Creates? Well, there's really not a lot to say. Concept made it seem as if they'd be the ones deciding on how the game is made, which I don't doubt, but obviously NT has more to do with the games than Concept. It's no coincidence that NT would be working on this though. Notice that even Inafune has stated how he'd like to work with Capcom, but he doesn't do that right now since his name isn't quite as large as it used to be. But what we've established here is that with the outsourcing, Inafune does not hold back on any aspect. If the game is being outsourced, the translation is being outsourced, and all of this goes to Concept, why set up this elaborate ruse that this game was his vision? Obviously, setting up the business is important, but there's so many points of failure, an engineer would be going into conniptions about how this is far from an efficient use of one's time. As stated, everything being outsourced makes it more expensive. Inafune may be running the ship, but he barely does it hands-on, opting instead for the workers themselves to do everything. So what was the angle of Inafune? Well, now we get into the business aspects. Inafune has another business he runs, not just the CEO of Concept, but also the advisor of Inflection Point Capital. Now I know the site changed a bit, but I have an older archive. Sadly, I didn't save it when he had his partners there. But that's what Google is for. You see, the point of Concept isn't to make games, it's to create a new Capcom with Inafune in charge. Strong accusation here, sure, but I have the proof in the pudding as we speak. First, I meant to finish this project last October, but kept getting more information. The information was in the form of how IPC worked. It was a capitalist enterprise with Inafune at the top, similar to Sugimoto, but with partners. His partners, for the record, Alexander DiGiorgio, the chief operating officer, and Kevin Lim, the financier. So the question is, coming to you, is how does this matter? Well, in regards to Inafune, it matters a bit. Alexander is one of the people okaying this way of fleecing the masses, and Kevin Lim is the one in control of money. So they decide their own paycheck and that of the employees. So imagine what happens when a certain someone who is complaining about how she isn't making enough money to pay for rent while quitting their job. But that's not really relevant. I focus more on Kevin Lim for a reason. Just consider what he could do during a Kickstarter as the financier for Inafune. If he gave money during the Kickstarter to finance anonymously, what would that do but increase the amount given to the Kickstarter? Again, we know this happens because Shaq did it. You can make a lot of money by laundering it through the Kickstarter system. Funnel it through a few friends and it's a low interest bank loan, far better than the usury fees of the private banking system or even the government, who aren't doing enough to cater to the public, no matter the country of origin. So having learned all this, let's look at the Kickstarter one more time. But let's look at this from the gamer perspective and a business perspective. Would a gamer spend $5,000 in an anonymous donation, or $500? And if Inafune decides to state that a lot of funds came from the Middle East, which Dina has already said isn't quite as big on games, what's going on here? Economically speaking, and in my opinion, I believe that this represents one thing: economic failure. Our society, along with Japanese society, cannot give people enough money to create a business in entertainment. In America, we have stigmatized gaming, music, and movies to the point that the only ones that can create are large corporations such as EA and Valve. The little guy has less wiggle room for making big budget games outside of Origin and Steam, and with the recent mod fiasco, whereupon modders are taxed for most of their wealth by publishers. The system is rigged and it's hard to get ahead. This is a system for publishers which doesn't very much benefit consumers and developers who are on the low ends of the totem pole. Such is the world that Inafune is trying to create. He's harped about the Japanese market, moved to the Chinese one, swindled the American market, and basically endorses ripping off young Japanese developers to make him money over anything else. I mean, look at who controls the advertising. It's not anyone but Inafune. By his own admission, Inafune wants to be a banker and not a game creator. This venture capitalism is dangerous and gives him the power to decide the fate of developers and should be resisted. Simply because of what the venture capitalism does, it doesn't put money into the game industry, it takes money out of it. This is Inafune in his attempt to make his own version of Capcom, which he controls. He wants the freedom to make developers indebted to him in his fiefdom and ignores comments from the fans. This is the new generation of Keiji Sugimoto, who owns a vineyard, over making sure that his company makes better games. So what to do? Changing this into something more consumer or developer oriented would have to occur, but people have to recognize the system in place. This system gives publishers a lot of leeway, and Inafune got a lot of it to take money from people. So what's the solution to IPEX, heavy marketing, womanomics, and crappy gaming? That's up to you. Yes, you, the community. You're the ones that helped to make the Mega Man series a success. Inafune doesn't have much to do with it. Remember, he took the credit for the work of other people. The games of the fan projects are usually far better and more deeply devoted, and the corporations have decided to do what you can do far easier and cheaper. But Inafune, as he goes to the Tokyo Indie Fest to look for ripe young suckers in order to feed the company built by the Mega Man community. Let's face it, Inafune leached into a situation that he created. His games were always over budget, overpriced, understaffed, and buggy. Capcom learned this and it's incorporated into both companies, which prevents you from making a better game than them. IP law, nostalgia, Inafune. Think about what you can do and how you can make a small team to organize and create. That's a far better option than anything else. But that's not all. Getting the Unity to work or the Unreal Engine has made game creation far easier than in yesterday. Make something in the same vein and be his competition. Again, work with friends and others and organize. Agitate for change. Don't let Inafune forget how he took your money and attempted to create a corrupt empire. Taking it down and making something better works far better than sitting on the sidelines for a game that won't live up to your standards. Because when you see the controls are beyond fucked, you know it can't get much worse. Hopefully people learned about Inafune today. Hopefully we get more people working on more games with better community input. But this one is a lost cause. Buy from this company with caution. It only has one interest in mind: Inafune's. It takes a special brass for a man to give a few interviews where he talks about staying on target or creating characters when the only one he loves to death is his Marty Stew. But for this man to say he's true to the concept when he's broken promises and created a team based around a simple concept but used to make more money for his alternate companies is really telling of a person's integrity. The community deserves better. And the community is far better and far more resilient than one businessman who can't create by himself. Take care. See you next time.